So Glenn Greenwald tweeted this the other day. The reason I'm sharing it with you is because I think this perfectly demonstrates and highlights why it is that so many people on the left are just so tired and so beaten down and have tapped out. They've tapped out of the system because they're like, this doesn't represent me at all. So what you're going to see here is Obama talking to the Wall Street Journal, and he ended up like accidentally exposing everything that's wrong with the modern day Democratic Party and why so many of us are frustrated.
In my conversations with the Republicans, I actually think the divide is not that wide. So what we just have to do is find a pathway where Republicans in the House in particular feel comfortable enough about process that they can go ahead and meet us. This, by the way, Jerry, I think is a good example of something that's been striking me about our politics for a while. When you go to other countries, the political divisions are so much more stark and wider. Here in America, the difference between Democrats and Republicans, we're fighting inside the 40-yard line. Maybe
you fooled most people on that in the last few months, I'd say.
No. I would distinguish between the rhetoric and the tactics versus the ideological differences. I mean, in most countries, you've got, people call me a socialist sometimes, but no, you got to meet real socialists. You'll have a sense of what a socialist is. I'm talking about lowering the corporate tax rate. My health care reform is based on the private marketplace. Stock market's looking pretty good last time I checked. And it is true that I'm concerned about growing inequality in our system, but nobody questions the efficacy of market economies in terms of producing wealth and innovation and keeping us competitive. My simple point is this: if we can get beyond the tactical advantages that parties perceive in painting folks as extreme and trying to keep an eye always on the next election, and for a while at least just focus on governing, then there is probably 70% overlap on a whole range of issues. A lot of Republicans want to get infrastructure done, just like I do. A lot of them believe in basic research, just like I do. A lot of them want to reform entitlements to make sure that they're affordable for the next generation. So do I. A lot of them say they want to reform our tax system. So do I. There are going to be differences on the details. And those details matter, and I'll fight very hard for them, but we shouldn't think that somehow the reason we've got these problems is because our policy differences are so great.
That perfectly describes the neoliberal corporate Democratic Party. Perfectly. There's another famous video of Obama from earlier on. This is from 2013, but there's a video of him, I believe in his first term, if I'm not mistaken, where he says, like, hey, if you look at my policies, they're basically like moderate Republican policies from a couple decades ago. It's quite an admission. Who, me? I'm like a moderate Republican. And you heard him right there. Let's go through some of what he says. The one part that really I was just like, wow. He says there's a 70% overlap with him and Republicans. So in other words, there's campaigning Obama, and when I'm on the campaign trail, I'm going to be a fire breather, I'm going to sound populist, but then there's governing Obama, and when I'm governing, see, this is when we get to the part where it's all adults in the room, and when they're all adults in the room, we have a 70% overlap, and we'll work together. And then he goes on to list things. Now notice something. He has this list of things that he's cool with working on. All of them, it's him agreeing to Republican priorities. That's so telling, because that's exactly what the left is frustrated about, is that you go down this list and it's like lowering the corporate tax rate. My healthcare reform helped the private market. The stock market is rising. Let's reform Social Security. Like, all of these things, all of them are like, hey, I'm going to meet the Republicans on their terms. And that's the problem. Because it's never like, oh, like when you had Bernie Sanders have bipartisan agreements with like Ron Paul, it's like, hey, let's agree to end the drug war. So Ron Paul is staying true to his libertarian principles. Bernie's staying true to his leftist principles. Let's free nonviolent drug offenders. Let's increase freedom and legalize marijuana. There's agreement there where they're meeting on their own terms, but it's not Bernie compromising his values. It's not the Democrat, Bernie's an independent. It's not the lefty compromising their values. In the case of Obama, perhaps he's not compromising his values either, but then he's just not what a lot of people thought he was. He's not a lefty. And he's not. Again, he might campaign as one from time to time, but when he's actually governing, he's like, yeah, here's the list of things I agree with the right on. And I think there's 70% overlap with the Republicans. 70%. And then he says, well, other countries have bigger divisions. So, us, we're arguing within the 40-yard line. So he's saying that, like, hey, in European countries, you have, like, social democrats and you have communists, and they really fight it out, and there's total disagreement. Here in the U.S., the disagreements between the neoliberal corporate Democrats and the establishment Republicans, they're very minimal. So, listen, but this perfectly, like, highlights a problem I've talked about time and time again, and others have, which is, the problem is not that we don't have bipartisanship, it's that we have too much bipartisanship. But the bipartisan agreement is always like, let's, reduce regulations on Wall Street. Let's cut taxes for the rich. Let's continue our endless wars. That's where there's bipartisan agreement. The overwhelming majority of the time, if Democrats and Republicans are agreeing, it's to screw you and help their donors. And in the case of Obama, like, he got pressure from the right, the Republican Party, from the media, and also the corporate money he's taken, I'm sure, impacted his ideology. So Obama was just not a lefty. He was a neoliberal corporatist, and he was comfortable with that. And he viewed himself as a technocratic manager. Technocratic manager. Yes, I'm the adult in the room. I'm the manager. I'll be competent. But the priorities were not Medicare for all, not a living wage, not ending the wars, not a Green New Deal. When Jill Stein ran on that in 2012, she was laughed out of the room by Democrats. So I think this perfectly highlights everything that's wrong with the neoliberal corporate Democrats. But notice how comfortable he is talking about it when he's around the Wall Street Journal and the elite media. He's like, well, you guys got me pinned as like this outsider populist. I'm not that. I promise you. We know, Obama, we know. And that's why people like me and many in my audience, we just feel, well, the Democratic Party's not for us. What do you want me to tell you? I don't agree with you, and you don't agree with me. So I don't know why there's this badgering that goes on about vote blue no matter who, vote for our candidates. Why? We don't agree. I mean, if you want to do a comprehensive analysis and break it down issue for issue, yes, we'd probably agree more with Democrats because there's much more overlap on the social issues. And then every now and then on the economic stuff, they throw you a bone and they do something decent, like, Obama slightly raised taxes on the richest. Okay, good. So yeah, you could say there's maybe a little bit more agreement with the Democrats and that there's, they are a lesser evil in some respects. But again, it goes back to my original point, which is, what are your minimum standards? What does it take for you to go out there to actually cast a vote, to actually get involved? And for me, it's a hell of a lot more than just like, hey, this person agrees with me on abortion. Like, I need more than that. That's not enough. That's not good enough. Oh, he or she will stop the Supreme Court from going, to some idiot far-right person. Okay, but who are they going to pick? It's always like some silly centrist. Yeah, the centrist is better than the far-right person, but this is still not enough. You gotta go further. There's got to be some, like, again, if you can't pass my lenient litmus test, that's on you, man, because I think I'm very reasonable with how lenient I've made my purity test. And these guys still don't pass it. And that really is something else.